morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation. I hope you have your coffee or your tea and your Bible ready. We're going to look today at one specific verse in the Bible. It's part of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. Mathew chapter 5 verse 3 is the very first verse in what we know as the Beatitudes. Now I want to read it to you in several different translations and paraphrases. The NIV, King James, a New King James Version, and the New American Standard all render it this way. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The New English Bible says, how blessed are those who know they are poor, the kingdom of heaven is theirs. The Living Bible reads, humble men are very fortunate, for the kingdom of heaven is given to them. The New Living Translation puts it this way, God blesses those who realize their need for Him, for the kingdom of heaven is given to them. The Amplified Bible expands this to read, blessed, happy, to be envied, and spiritually prosperous are the poor in spirit, the humble, rating themselves insignificant, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. My favorite translation is in the Message, and it captures the meaning very well. It says, you are blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and His rule. You are to be envied when you're at the end of your rope. That sounds crazy, right? When someone writes hashtag blessed, that is not what they are talking about. And I believe that many of us feel like we're at the end of our rope right now. And we think that that's a bad thing. But this morning I want to look at how it could actually be a good place to be. I believe there are 3 things you realize when you're at the end of your rope that help us understand what it means to be poor in spirit and in turn blessed. One thing is when you're at the end of your rope, you realize that you're broken. Brokenness is the first building block of the poor in spirit. We were taught as kids to hate broken things. I broke many things when growing up that I got in trouble for. I broke the window in the front door, a living room lamp, a number of dishes, and even a couple of my bones. And as I got older, I remember broken promises and, of course, my first broken heart. I was 14 years old, but I won't go there. We could all write a long list of broken things in our lives that, like the nursery rhyme says, all the king's horses and all the king's men could not put back together again. We may not like to admit it. I know I certainly don't, but all of us have been bruised and broken, pieces glued and re-glued more times than we care to remember. But God is in the broken places of life, even when you can't see Him. One person said God uses broken things, broken seeds to grow, broken soil to grow them in, broken clouds to water them, broken grain to make bread, and broken bread to nourish our broken bodies. Brokenness is not always bad. Do you know that God delights in brokenness? Psalm 51, 16-17 says, you do not delight in sacrifice, or I would bring it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. God delights in brokenness because it brings us nearer to Him. And that's good news. When we are poor in spirit, when we fall upon Jesus and are broken, when we humble ourselves before God and we acknowledge our dependence on Him, then God will pick up the broken pieces and put us back together again. You see, God can't fix what we fake. But when we admit that we're broken, that is the beginning of change in our lives. The second thing you realize when you're at the end of your rope is that you are spiritually bankrupt. A person who's poor in spirit is someone who's undeniably destitute and dependent on someone else. Jesus is really saying to be poor in spirit is to recognize our abject spiritual bankruptcy before a holy God. It's the idea of coming before God with empty hands. The second verse of that great hymn, Rock of Ages, says it well. Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Tim Keller offers this definition of what it means to be poor in spirit. He says it means seeing that you are deeply in debt before God and you have no ability to even begin to redeem yourself. God's free generosity to you at infinite cost to him is your only hope. But he goes on to say that it's hard for us today, and he explains it this way. On the contrary, you believe that God owes you some things. He ought to answer your prayers and to bless you for the many things you've done. We can say that you are middle class in spirit. And that's exactly what keeps many of us from experiencing God's blessing in our lives. Because we approach him as if we have something to offer. We try to bribe God with things that are already his. Yet it's not until we admit our dependence for God and our desperation for him that we can truly be blessed. And that's hard for us because we're all about maintaining the image. We're about looking like we have it all together. We can be like the person who is ready to declare bankruptcy but is driving around in a brand new car because they're keeping up the facade as long as possible. Spiritually, we can be like this, where for years and years we don't acknowledge our mess and we don't want anyone to see inside and we don't want to say that we need help. But Jesus says, blessed are you when you reach that point where you realize that you're broken and you declare spiritual bankruptcy. And the final thing you realize when you're at the end of your rope is that you need to ask for help. Sometimes the most difficult words to say are, I need help. We don't like to ask for help. We'd rather say, I can do it myself. We're often too embarrassed to admit our need. We want to be self-reliant. We want to be able to help ourselves. That's what we celebrate, right? There are no athletic awards for being poor in spirit. No one puts that on their resume or runs for office on that platform. I was actually reading about a survey that asked people to quote their favorite Bible verse. And one of the most common verses was this verse. You might know it. God helps those who help themselves. Yes, that's a great verse, but it's nowhere in the Bible. It's just not there. The Bible actually teaches that God helps those who cannot help themselves. That's who God helps. It's not random that Jesus began his sermon by saying those who are at the end of their rope will be blessed. The door into the kingdom of Christ is low, and you can't stand tall if you want to enter. You must be humble, because where there's less of us, we can experience more of him. To be envied are those who are at the end of their rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule. So if you're at the end of your rope today and you're feeling like, I can't do it, I can't mend my marriage, I can't fix my kids, I can't control my temper, I can't handle this isolation anymore, I can't control my anxiety, I can't save myself, I can't put the pieces back together, God, I just can't do it anymore. If you're at that place, then I want you to know you are blessed. You're now in a place where God can help you. And I want to encourage you to call out to him and ask for his help today. He loves you and he's able to do more than you could ever ask or think. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. God bless you. Stay safe and let your light shine.